So one of the worst things that you have with your home lab is you get prompted with this. So on today's video, I'm going to cover off something I haven't done on home labbing for a while, and that is setting up Traefik. Now, what is Traefik? Now, if you think about it this way, Traefik is a reverse proxy. Now, there's a couple of ways you can use this. You can use it to absolutely self-host and stick a reverse proxy in behind. You could port forward from your router and basically have it publish your applications available on the World Wide Web. Obviously, then you are allowing ingress into your network, so you need to make sure that there's a lot of security set up to do that. Now, what we're going to do in this video is not actually do that. Well, I'm not going to expose this to the internet. All I'm actually going to do is use it to gain an SSL cert. Now, there's plenty of ways you can do this, and I know you can do it with the likes of Nginx proxy and Caddy, etc., and they are probably a lot simpler to set up. However, the great thing is with Traefik is you can set up a lot of middleware around that device and basically have some more advanced features, albeit there's a lot more configuration in those YAML files to basically get it up and running. So we're just going to cover off the simple steps on how to do it. I will do a video later on to cover off how to make it more secure if you want to expose externally, and probably stick some kind of middleware in between to help provide that extra level of security. Anyway, what you can do is you can have a look on my GitHub page. All the YAML files are there and the stuff you'll need. There's also a blog post further down if you need some additional help with the commands, etc., which is available on my website. But either way, let's step through and go through the process. Okay, so now we've covered off what Traefik is and how we're going to go about setting it up. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the first things we're going to need is a domain. Now, using something like Cloudflare is basically what I'd recommend here, because what we're trying to do is use that DNS query to basically return what we're looking for. So the easiest way to do it is go set yourself up an account with Cloudflare. Once done, what you can do is go to register domains down this left hand side under domain registration. Let's say, for example, I was looking for a dev environment, maybe called that. What I could do is come and have a look in here, and as I can see there, it's like $4.94. So that's obviously in US dollars, so you can do the conversion based on where you are. Obviously me in the UK, yeah, then that's a recurring fee as well, so that will literally be $4.94 every single year. Go off and buy that and go through that process. What I would then need to do is do a couple of other bits in Cloudflare to basically get everything set up. So we come into dev. Now, a couple of things I'd need to do is basically go off and just turn into TLS. Make sure I set my SSL TLS encryption method to full. The reason for that is to stop different problems where it comes to redirects, because what we're going to be doing is a lot of redirects. But either way, we're going to need to have that set. And then what we need to do is unload a couple of DNS entries. So what I'd need to do for Traefik, for example, is I'll go and add a record now. It'll be a CNAME, and I will call this Traefik dashboard, and then just face it to the root. Now, there are a couple of ways if you've got dynamic DNS, or dynamic IP. One of the easiest ways to basically solve that is to use Cloudflare DDNS. I'll do that on a different video. So if we just click that and save, we've now got that CNAME created against that bit, and as you can see, this particular one here is created by my Cloudflare DDNS, so that's doing the activity for me. So that's pretty much everything I need to do in this area. Final thing I will need is to get an API key for this. So in my profile, what I'll do is come down to API tokens and set myself a token. It'll be an edit zone DNS, and then I want it to edit. I will want all zones and do continue. Create that token. This token will only be available for a short period, so I'll just copy that. I'm going to stick that in a notepad somewhere. And I will put that off to one side, so I've got that available. And that is all we need to do in Cloudflare, so I'll shut that for now. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is get rid of this problem. So what we're going to need is a device which is logged in to Ubuntu server. I'm just going to connect back to mine. And we're going to make sure that we've got Docker and Docker Compose installed. If you don't know how to do that, there's a video up there that will run you through it. Now the next step for us is to basically create the area that we will require for these, for Traefik. So we're going to create a couple of directories. So the first one I'm going to do is basically just a Traefik one. So it's going to ask for my password. Just put that one in. And that will be created. If I do an ls now, Traefik exists. So if I cd into there, sudo make directory, and the next one is config.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
So I've made a couple in there. Now the next thing is to create 3 more files. So the 3 files I need to create are basically a config YAML, a Acme JSON, and a Traefik YAML. And we need to do some modifications to the acme.json just to basically give it a chmod 600, just so that we don't get a few challenges. So the easiest way to create those is as follows. So we'll do a sudo touch acme.json, follow that one, and then do Traefik.yaml, and the same for config.yaml. And what we're then going to do is do that sudo mod and we should just be able to just apply that there. So that's now been given that right permission. Now the next thing we would do is basically add in the Traefik YAML, and what you can do is if you go to my GitHub, you'll be able to get all of these. The link is in the description, but I'm just going to basically paste this in and I'll talk you through the bits you're going to need to change. So if I just copy this from my clipboard, paste this in, and the thing you'll need to change in here is your email address. And this will be the one associated to your Cloudflare. Now I will suggest that you may need to untick this or uncomment this if you get a few problems. So if you find your Acme JSON isn't populating, it's usually around this propagation check, and it's usually because you've only just created your domain. So yeah, one of those just worth bearing in mind. We'll save that. That's done. We're not going to put anything in the config YAML as yet. We'll probably cover that off a bit later on in another video, because there's a lot more configuration we can do with Traefik to kind of build upon it. Now, the next step we're going to do is drop back a level, and we're going to do a sudo touch docker compose .yaml. Now I'm not going to actually go in and edit this yet, but I'm just creating it. So that's done. Now the next step I want to do is basically install a application that enables us to create a base64 password, because we're going to need that login credentials for various pieces in a moment. So what I'm going to do is very similar to what we've done before, is just run two additional commands. So one is a sudo get update, and the other is to add in the Apache 2 utils. So those two commands there. I'll paste those in, and that should run away and do exactly what I want it to do, and then just do a yes. And that's done. The next one will be is to actually get that bit done. Now I'll talk you through this command. So what this command is doing is basically using HT password to set this. Where I've got user here and where I've got password here, this is where you need to put in your user. Now we could use admin and password. I certainly wouldn't recommend we do that. So I'm going to use one of the ones I would use normally. And hit that, and we'll get our export there. What I'm going to do is copy that as well into my notepad. So we've got a lot of the prereqs done now that we actually require, so which is good. So from that perspective, we can now start actually editing the YAML file, so the Docker Compose. So what we'll do now is a sudo nano docker /compose YAML, and we're going to paste in the file in. Again, this is available on my GitHub. I will talk through some of the elements here. So things we're going to need to do and change in here, so that you're aware, is these ports are needed just for exposure, so they are on 80 and 443. I'm not going to port forward to this. Now you can. I would strongly recommend you don't at this stage, because there's a lot more stuff that you need to do with Traefik to secure it a lot further. What we're trying to use Traefik for at the moment is to basically get us certs internally. So what I'll need to do in there is again use that same email. And the API key we got earlier. In this bit here, what you're going to need to do is I'm mapping some mounts. So these will be my username. So it will be the username that you created when you created your Ubuntu server. So in my cases, it's ExpressIT. Now, I've deliberately left an error here because you can see it's not pointing at these two correctly. It should be going, same with this one. Basically, there should be an additional config in here. But that's just so you can see that you will need to be aware of exactly the location of these files. But as I know they're in Traefik config, I can just add that variable in. So what we now need to do is that a CNAME we created earlier is update to reach that. So it will be dashboard. I was going to use ExpressIT dev.uk. You'll notice here it says your username password. So this one is that one we created earlier with Apache 2 utils on HT password. So we'll paste that in. And what we'll need to do is go back and make sure we've captured all that. Similar with this, so this one here needs to be updated to and the bottom two here, which are basically your wildcards. So there's a wildcard beneath this, and this one is for the main domain. So I just want this for expressitdev.uk, and this one here Now, I will say it's very much worth checking that you've put everything in here correctly at this stage. So just go through, double check this information you put in. What you don't want to be doing is putting yourself in an odd position. Another way round you can do this is if you don't want to necessarily imply the API email and this bit here, you can set an environmental variable and point it to a .env file. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. It's just something to bear in mind. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm just going to save it. Now you'll notice at the very bottom here, there is a network called proxy. So we are going to need to create that network before we actually try to launch this container. So I'm just going to do a Control X on this and press yes. And that is saved. Now the final thing we're going to do before we do much else is basically create the Docker network, and that again is simple as doing sudo docker network create and the network name. So in this case it's going to be proxy, and if you've done it correctly you will get a return of characters. So that's we're pretty much at that point. Now what I'm going to do, because I'm not exposing this to the internet, I'm going to need to be able to get to the dashboard. And the only way I can get to the dashboard is to basically set up either a local DNS property or change my host file. Now, if you want to change your host file, I'll go through that in a short moment. That will be for a Windows device. If you want to do it on the likes of Ubuntu, Mac OS, that kind of thing, again, just have a look in the description below and there will be some instructions that you can follow there. But either way, we're now at a position where we are pretty much good to go. So the really complicated part of getting Traefik installed is usually getting to the dashboard. A lot of people will be able to actually create the container, get the container to work, but they'll never be able to get to the dashboard. And it's usually just because the fact of, if you're not exposed to the internet, which you certainly don't want that dashboard exposed to the internet, you can have challenges because it's obviously looking at 80 and 443. So I'm going to get myself in a position where I'm good to make this change. I'm not actually going to do it just yet. So the command will be to do sudo docker compose.d. All I'm going to do is, because I can see the IP address of this particular host is 30251, I'm going to create a DNS record for that. Now I can create my DNS records in Pi-hole, and that's the way I'm going to go about doing it. So if I go into my Pi-hole instance, which I'll just drag over, in my local DNS records, I'm going to basically copy in the following, so Traefik.dashboard.expressitdev.uk, and it's going to point to 192.168.32. Sorry, 30.251. And I'm just going to add that record in there. And I'm going to keep hold of that because we're going to want to go there once this is all done. So we're now in a position where it's a good place to actually do it. So if we just do now sudo docker compose rd, it's going to go and pull down that repository and start Traefik. So all being well, we should now have everything we're looking for. However, I want to just do a check and balance on that to make sure we're in that position. So the good thing is, because I'm using this particular app, what I can do is I can probably see that I've definitely misspelt something. So this is why I said it's very much worth checking your YAML file. So what I've done is I've put 2 E's there. So let's just update that and update that YAML file. So if I go into Traefik and go into the config, what I'm doing is looking to see there that this has got 13K in it, which means that has updated. So the good news is, I think I'm pretty much confident now that if I go to the website here, so if I navigate to Traefik.dashboard expressitdev.uk, now I've flushed all my DNS, etc. I can now log in with the credentials I supplied earlier when I did the Apache 2 utils. And as you can see, this is now set up. So I can go in here and see the ones that I've got done. So the Traefik.dashboard is working. Other HTTP services and middlewares are pretty much all set up to go. So yeah, that's how you do it. Now, the one thing just to call out is, you notice I did make a couple of mistakes when I was building my Docker Compose, is to just double check. If you're not sure, maybe install something like Portainer on top, route that through Traefik, and then you can actually look at the logs a lot cleaner and see exactly what's causing the problem. So hopefully you've found that video helpful and it's worked for you. Now, what I did say earlier on is I would show you how to do the host files. So let me just cover that one off. So doing host files in Windows. Now this is probably just one of the easiest ways possible to do it. So all I'm going to do is open up Notepad, run as administrator. And what will happen is, when I come in here, I'm just going to now go File, Open, and I'm going to navigate to C Windows, System 32, I think it's drivers, and then etc, and what I need to do is make that all, and you'll find your host file there. So I'm going to open that host file. Now all I need to do is add in that local host. So it would be to put the following IP address in there, which would be 192.168.30.251, and then that URL I was looking for earlier. I'm not obviously going to do it because I don't need to change it, but all I then do is save the file and we're good to go. So the only problem with doing the host files is, if I did every single host file, I'd have to go and do it on every machine. Obviously, if you're just accessing from one machine, that's perfectly fine. That's why using something like a DNS resolver to solve that problem, which you can configure some local DNS, is the preferred route. Obviously, if you're using Pi-hole, it's really simple to do. Other kind of services may be out there that can do the same service as well. Anyway, if you have liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you next time.